Hello and welcome to the 5th episode in this series on unlocking brand's value in your organisation. Today we're going to be digging into a really hot topic and hopefully laying out some really strong statistical evidence of why brand is so valuable as an investment for your company. Branding is one of those things that can be really difficult at times to find investment for when budgeting in your organisation, but conversely is recognised to be one of the most valuable investments that a company can make in its long-term success. Steve Forbes, the editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine, said the following statement: "Your brand is the single most important investment that you can make in your business." Okay, so therefore brand work is really the linchpin of literally all other activities that an organisation invests in on multiple levels. The other side of the argument that some people say is that why do we bother investing in something that is really hard to measure and therefore is difficult to justify? Why is it that we should focus on something that doesn't appear to give us any immediate return on investment and provides little in terms of impact for our spend? So stick around as we're going to dig into it. One of the main issues facing marketing generally these days is this ongoing debate between the role of data and statistics, marketing science, and the other side of the conversation, which is around sort of creativity and the intangible benefits that companies experience from building their brands and building relationships with audiences. 20 years ago today, there was a real focus on the role of brand building in businesses. Still, the internet has provided us with just so much data, so many connection points to the actual impact of work that's been done that can be then measured. And so therefore some of the more intangible benefits that companies receive from building their brands are harder to measure in light of that. And it's very common that companies then lean into more tactical solutions that they feel more comfortable investing in because they see the impact of their spend. But in some ways that can undermine the value of some of the intangible stuff, and in some instances has led to sort of an underinvestment in some of the more intangible benefits of an organisation. Now, when we look at Steve Forbes' quote that we just read out, that there's nothing more important than the investment in brand, and we see brands like Coke and Apple, and we know intuitively and through data as well in some regards that the value of this work is just critical to companies. So you're seeing this sort of separation really, where people are moving away from brand, but then you also see people that are also sort of strongly investing in it and continue to. But this is partly because there's the confusion around brand, and we've talked about this before in terms of what it really is and what it is that you're actually investing in, which is where this misdirection of understanding and diagnosis can cause there to be a vulnerability for organisations as they approach this subject. But what I want to do today is look at this. I want to provide you as business owners and brand leaders and agencies who need to develop their strategic capabilities, the ammunition to have these chunky conversations around this topic and justify spend. So what we're going to do today is walk through the 12 reasons why brand activity and branding is so critical to business success. So without further ado, number 1, intangible assets account for 84% of market capitalisation. So the S&P 500 is a stock market index that measures the stock performance of the largest 500 companies in the US. A study from Ocean Tome stated that the market's intangible assets account for 84% of its capitalisation for the entire S&P 500. This reflects in many ways a cultural shift that we've been seeing as the internet enables intellectual property to be more readily available and therefore becoming more critical to a company's value. And it shows us really also how it's sort of intangible assets, not only physical products or services, make up a considerable part of the overall value of the leading players in the US industry. So, number 2, a company's intangible assets create value. So 20% of a business's market capitalisation actually comes from the intangible value that it holds. This is also an average as well, so it's not just the highest performers It's also derived from several different data points across a variety of the world's major brand valuation companies such as Brand Finance, Millward Brand and Interbrand. Branding investment accelerates corporate value. Again, in a study by Brands in 2020, it states that in the period between 2006 and 2020, what they categorise as the Brands Power portfolio increased by 282%. So it put this into context. Over the same period, the S&P increased by only 120%, and another index called the MSCI World Index just increased 45.6%. This indicates that those that invest in their brand can expect the same sort of principle to play out in their own business. That compared to the S&P and the MSCI World Index, there is evidence that those that invest heavily in their brand should expect a significant return on that investment. Number 4, those organisations that invest heavily in their brand can expect triple sales volumes. So according to a study by Millward Brown again, brands with high power scores capture 3 times the average brand's volume sales as their investment in their brand, and the way that they have this strong bond with their audience really directly affects the consumer's predisposition to buy their products or services over that of a competitor. Again, it just highlights the fact that investment in brand builds preference, which then helps customers choose your brand over another in a complex marketplace. Number 5, they command a higher price. Organisations that invest heavily in their brand can expect to yield an average price premium 13% higher than the low strength brands over a long term. This and other previous statistics indicate the role that brand plays within the sales cycle and how vital that is. And it's super important not to separate these two metrics, simply because sales is directly impacted by brand and brand directly impacts sales. And so when we look into the analytics related to sales, we can also see that there is this intrinsic, inextricable connection between the two. So those that focus on brand also have the potential to quadruple their chance of growth. Strong brands are far more likely to grow in their markets than those that are weak. This looks like increasing their potential by 4 times. This sample was taken from 350 brands crossing diverse categories, and what it does is it indicates the role of brand is clearly linked to the overall success of the organisation in terms of their potential to grow, as it relates to those that don't invest in their brand as much. And so in terms of the overall success of an organisation, again, focusing on brand provides that organisation with a much richer, much higher chance of success over long haul. Number 7, strong brand decreases a consumer's price sensitivity by up to 20%. Okay, so when building a brand, according to the game theory from ThinkBox, 10% share of voice increase can provide much more tolerance in price sensitivity with reductions of between 5 and 20%. So this really means that those stronger brands within specific markets are more likely to command kind of a higher price. This is because the people are pretty much more familiar with them. They know them, and again, they trust them, and then that trust then converts into them being willing to invest their finances and sort of choose those brands. Number 8, brand building is proven to build sales activation more than tactical activities. So investment in brand building activity can pay back much more strongly than sort of short-term sales activation over periods between sort of 6 months plus. So you're really going to see the impact of this investment over a longer period. But once you get past that 6 month mark, you're going to see sales uplifts and an increase in impact. It's important because one of the main challenges that we're often finding is the role of more tactical activities that can kind of be clearly attached to those success metrics and data points, which is incredibly valuable and important to be able to have those different activities and also those metrics. But it sometimes can be, focused on at the detriment to sort of these long-term brand building activities that ultimately cause the organisation to grow and strengthen its reputation with its audience. And again, it's a long-term burn. It's understanding that over 6 months, this investment will pay out. Number 9, consumers buy from companies that they trust. 68% of consumers choose to buy from brands and services that they trust. 59% recommend these companies, and 38% of those defend companies that they trust. And this sort of statistic comes from Edelman, and over the years has stayed true and it's waxed and waned slightly in percentage, but really the core element of what that dictates to us is that companies that are trusted are those that benefit from relationships of strength with their audience. It's important to state that it's not only that we can see that the direct purchase is affected here, but those individuals have a willingness then to recommend those brands and those companies to others and speak out in defense of them in conversations. So this only becomes more critical when we can see that the role of referral is enhanced through digital media. If you think about how people now sort of recommend brands, how they rate brands, the importance of building strength in your brand, and the direct correlation that has upon people's willingness to then promote those brands, especially in that digital space that we're talking about, is really important to invest in. So number 10. Brand building should be about 60% of every organisation's marketing budget. So as we've talked about so far, the ongoing debate is how much focus there should be on brand building activities for those that invest in the brand's equity instead of those that are more activation driven to create overall sort of success and effectiveness. So a study by the IPA called The Long and Short of It looked into this and concluded that 60% of a particular organisation's marketing budget should be focused on brand building activity as opposed to sort of 40% for activation. Too little brand activity around brand building for a particular organisation will not create the brand equity needed to drive sales in the future. Number 11, long-term return on investment. We're going to follow on with the same theme and look at the long-term investment in marketing as opposed to sort of short-term and mid-term investment. When we can see that, again, a very similar statistic that 58% should be really focused on the long term, 42% on the mid-term, and around 18% should be on short or immediate term. And what we're seeing actually in today's marketing approach for the larger part is that a lot of those investments are starting to get flipped, and people are kind of investing much more heavily in tactical activities rather than sort of building mid to long term activities that sort of speak to the brand a little bit more. Number 12, an organisation that invests in brand has a much more engaged employee base. So we've looked at the investment in brand as a way of, looking at how it affects the external in terms of our customers. But what about the internal audiences? What are the critical elements of building a robust brand platform and establishing a brand is focusing on brand purpose. Now, Jim Stengel, former CMO of Procter & Gamble, asserts that an investment in a portfolio of firms that are driven by purpose and values is 400% more profitable than an investment in the S&P 500. So he's basically saying that if you're going to invest, focus on those companies that are investing in purpose, because they're much more likely to yield a better investment for you rather than the traditional sort of, S&P 500. Investing in your brand, therefore, has a critically positive impact not only on the internal morale and the effectiveness, but also on the bottom line. This evidence affirms that investing in your brand will pay off on every level, not just thinking about brand as an external issue and building relationships externally. That's obviously critical, but internally, as we sort of refocus our attention on the team and how they benefit from being driven by purpose, knowing an organisation has a meaningful impact on the world. Additionally, if you wanted to kind of more evidence, there's a whole bunch of statistics that show that a company with an engaged employee base grows its profits up to 3 times more than its competitors. And so take a look at sources like the Corporate Leadership Council, for example, that produces great statistics on this. So in conclusion, you can see that investment in your brand plays out enormous dividends, not only in your company's value and its position within the market, but its impact on the consumers and the role of sales, but also it really supports the whole organizational ecosystem when you think about the role that it plays for the team, driving culture, driving an engaged workforce through purpose, which leads to profitability. So I hope this has been super helpful for you. I know that some of these statistics have been really useful for me in terms of guiding clients into sort of similar types of investment for them in their brand, which hopefully, builds a strong organization and is well placed. So why don't you join me next week when we're going to dive into an even juicier topic, I would suggest, which is to look at the role of brand within organisation and what it means to use it as a decision-making tool. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next week.